And it all comes from the Sermon on the Mount, right? Sermon on the Mount is chapter 5, 6, and 7 of Matthew's Gospel. And it is the core of Jesus' teaching. And it's kind of not as though, Jesus said, let's have a workshop this day and gave it all there. But it's probably more something like that's exactly what Matthew did. He put together all the stuff that Jesus taught. So let's look at it. I want to start by saying key to what Jesus taught is to be real as a human being. Okay, it starts with our humanity. And it starts with me looking at another human being as a person, not as an object, not as a thing. All right? And when I turn away from that, when I make people into objects or things, that's really where sin comes from. All right? Sin is about that. All right? So if you take that as the overall teaching, then we could look at each one of these things that he mentions and see what it's applying to. Okay? So Matthew's gospel is also the gospel that is written for Jews who have converted to Christ. It's written by a Jew himself who converted to Christ. And who exactly Matthew is, we do not know. All right? So this came from his community. This preacher who preached and taught and obviously ran a community. We don't know him, but probably somebody from his community who had the ability to write began to write the stories, okay, that he taught. All right, so he obviously taught this. You heard the commandment, all right? So it's referring back to the Jewish commandments. And this is really important. If you want to convert Jews to Jesus, right, you can't scare them away. You have to say, go back to your story. You know that story. So go back to the story and what happened? What did they say? All right? Jesus says, I'm not coming here to take away that law of Moses. I'm coming here to fulfill it. Or maybe another way that we could look at it is a way to live it out. Okay? So you have heard it said that the person who commits murder obviously is judged for murder. But Jesus goes to the core. He says, what made the person angry in order to commit the murder? Do you see? He kind of goes to the heart. All right? And it's when I do that, when I go to anger, what am I doing? I'm making a person into a thing. Isn't that how we wind up killing each other? Right? We could see that very clearly today in modern warfare, right? Because we press a button thousands upon thousands of miles away from the enemy. So they're already a thing, right? They're an object on a screen. They're not a person. There was something healthier about two people with rocks having to smash each other's faces. There's something good about that. Because it means you have to look at the person. And that could change your heart. But when a person is on a screen thousands upon thousands of miles away, and you only have to press a button, you have made a thing of a person. Now you don't know their story. You haven't looked into their eyes. You don't know their parents or their children or their spouse. All of a sudden, you can commit murder very easily. Okay? Do you see what Jesus is getting at here? Go to the heart. That's what happens. Okay? Really important. All right. So he says, you have heard the commandment. You shall not commit adultery. It's very, very basic. All right? But there's something before adultery that happens. Right? It's that entertaining in the heart that happens. It's the make-believe of it that happens. And that's how it happens. Again, go back to the heart. What's in the heart? And then it gives us clarity. All right? The fact is we don't do it. We don't do it for any of these things. All right? But Jesus keeps kind of, pulling us back and saying, all right, this is how we are most human. Right? See, it's very interesting. He's not about condemning us. He's about us looking at ourselves. Do you see the difference? All right? And you see, unfortunately, many of the churches, how this is taught is condemnation. No, these are human mistakes. And we all make these human mistakes. That's what happens. But we would be a little bit better at it if we looked at the heart. Right? Looked at the heart. Divorce. Remember what divorce meant in Jesus' day. Divorce in Jesus' day was a man, only a man, writes a letter of freedom to this woman. A man. He is the one who has the power and the authority to do this. He writes this letter of dismissal. You are dismissed. You burnt my toast. Okay? It could be for something as silly in our culture as that. Right? And now she is without family, without security, without property, and without money. Jesus' whole teaching on divorce, I mean, obviously divorce isn't the best way to be married, right? But his whole teaching on divorce is about not making women into things. Women are persons, right? And that's what upset the people and the religious tradition of his day. They were upset. But they were upset because he raised the dignity of women from a thing to a person. All right? Women have, in Jesus' mind, equal rights in a relationship. One is not better than the other because they're male. One doesn't have all the power because they're male. He's saying there are two people. And he even goes so far as to say, now because you wrote this letter of dismissal to this woman, it's your sin, he says to the men, you have caused her to sin because now she can do nothing else but commit adultery. She's got to be outside the marriage because she doesn't have a choice. Right? Do you see what he's saying? Do you see how this upset? I mean, if you thought of it from the male perspective in his day, this was such upsetting news. Right? In Mark's gospel, Peter goes on to say, well, it's better off not to even get married. He's so upset. All right? Because he says, how could this teaching be true? Right? Because every man who was a husband thought of his wife in this way. All right? And that's really, really important to look at in the context. So that imagine Jesus saying to women, you are full human beings where God resides. Right? And you have needs and wants in this relationship just like him. What a difference. Okay? All right? And then, unfortunately, there's always been this terrible backlash with divorce in the Christian tradition. And each church has done this, really each church has done it poorly. I mean, because they're trying to be faithful to what Jesus is saying, but taking it out of context. Right? Taking it out of context. Really bad. You have to keep it in its context and now try to say, because Jesus was saying, well, your marriage is marriage and it's a good thing. But again, there's going to be mistakes in it. Right? There's going to be mistakes in it that people shouldn't be in. And that's just it. The Orthodox Church, the Greek Orthodox Church, Russian Orthodox Church, that's exactly what they say when somebody gets divorced. Oh, you made a mistake. This was the wrong person. And they welcome you to marry in church again. Right? That's what the Orthodox Church does. Right? Because that's what happens. It's a mistake, And you can't know all the drama that's going to happen in a relationship until you lived into it. All right? So again, person as persons. That's what Jesus is talking about. And then oaths or promises, or, to swear by something. It's to make a thing out of relationship, right? Because if I'm saying to a friend, I'm giving you this, I don't know, car, for instance, all right, then it's about a relationship. It's not about making
Please
a
enter
thing.
your PIN followed by the pound or hash.
It's not
If you do
about.
not know your PIN,
So it's not about making a thing out of even that relationship. Your relationship is with God, the divine, and you have a relationship. So it's not about swearing of anything. It's about living into a relationship, all right? It's always living into a relationship, right? And so what Jesus is saying in the whole of the Sermon on the Mount is, how are we living into our relationships? How are we walking with other people in this world? Are we making them into things, or are we making them into objects, or are we relating to them? Now, as easily as we could talk about that with other persons, when have we done that with ourselves? When have we seen ourselves as less than, made in the image of God? When have we settled sometimes in relationships, sometimes at a job? When have we settled and not done what our heart is saying? Not doing what the heart, where the divine lives, is saying. Because God is always calling us to a deeper self, to be more human, to be more of ourselves. And that's who Jesus is the example of, right? The one who keeps saying yes to Spirit, yes to the power of God within him, yes to being in relationship with others, even who would be his enemies, even who would crucify him. It's being yes in a relationship, and never making a person into a thing, right? Never reducing a relationship to a thing that you put outside of yourself. It's always within you, right? And so each one of those examples that Jesus gives is about, how do I be the best human being I can be, right? And each one of them, just like the fire and the water we heard in that first reading, each one of them is very positive, but has a shadow side, right? There's a shadow side to every relationship. There's a shadow side to every marriage. There's a shadow side to every sexual thought. There's a shadow side to every promise we make. There's always a shadow side. To recognize it, to see it, and to be our best selves through it, right? No matter what our choices are in them. Amen. Any thoughts? It's just a lot of material. It's a big gospel with a lot of teaching that, unfortunately, we have 2,000 years of it put on top of our heads. So to try to go back to the context is really hard, right? What does it mean for us is the real important question.
Yeah, because